Welcome, Tom. Thank you for joining me today here in Zurich.
Thank you, Paolo.
I think the first question that comes natural as one reads the material that you have published is, how did you get to purpose?
Okay. Realize, first of all, I'm a professor of strategy, so I did not start on purpose. And what my passion is about is what shapes the actions and decisions that companies make, and what questions they ask in terms of not just what they do today, but how they actually prepare for the future. And we've done a lot of research in terms of how we can break companies out to think about the future in an interesting way, and what actually allows companies to grow, and what allows companies to become more profitable, and allows companies to become more impactful. And we did a series of studies. We started off with one study that we went off and talked to 156 CEOs around the world. And this was by different industries, different size companies, ages, and different areas. And we really asked them what were the challenges that they faced in preparing for this changing world. And at the time, we came away with 4 themes that really were causing an impact. One of them was, how do they actually start to think outside in? I mean, too many companies today, they define the world looking inside out. This is what I do, so this is what the world must look like. So really thinking outside in was one area. A second area really had to do with thinking about ecosystems. It's not just what you do, it's what you do and influence others. It's about the network that you operate in. The third had to do with breaking this kind of incrementalism and really looking at disruptive innovation. The fourth one, which was the one that surprised us, was actually purpose. And what we found is that companies that are successful, they use different lenses that empower them to ask different questions to shape the future. And that's where we started to focus in on purpose. And we supplemented that with another research study where we looked at 32 companies that had an average CAGR over the last 5 years of in excess of 32%. And what we found again, purpose came out. And from a strategy professor, it really leads to the question of, okay, what, besides being words on a wall, besides being slogans, what can purpose actually do to impact what a company does and how it views and shapes its future? So that's where I came to this topic of purpose.
Yeah, and you just said this difference between, is purpose just a slogan on the wall, or is purpose real? Having been through a transformational journey myself, where we brought our business to be more purpose-driven than it was before, or putting purpose at the center of what we do, I have always a feeling that purpose is met with a sense of skepticism by many stakeholders. Yeah. Oh, is it real? How does it, shouldn't you really be just after value and shareholder value? Where do you fit purpose in? So what makes purpose real in a sense? How do you define purpose?
Okay, first of all, you're right in that purpose in most organizations, unfortunately most, is a source of skepticism and cynicism inside and out. Because if you look at what happens inside of many companies, essentially the way organizations think is really trapped in the past and is really focused on, how do I look at my business today looking out and today going forward? And when they think about strategy, it's always based on incrementalism, inside out back, and inside out and today forward. When you start to bring a lens of purpose or something like that, what you allow an organization and its people inside to do is to ask a different set of questions. All of a sudden, as opposed to, am I going to meet this month's budget? Am I going to incrementally lower my costs? Am I going to grow my market share? Am I going to continue to win against my traditional competitors? People are trapped in these kind of questions. And when you bring something like purpose to the organization, it allows them to ask different questions. It allows them to say, wait a minute, as opposed to looking inside out today forward, what if I look outside in, future back? What if I think about where the opportunities exist? What if I think about where I can, as an organization, have an impact? Where I as an organization can grow. We know today growth does not come from fighting for market share in traditional and declining industries or stagnant industries. Growth comes from identifying needs, creating markets, and changing business models. That's where growth comes from. So for an organization inside, Purpose has a lot to do with freeing up the organization to ask different sets of questions and take different lenses looking at its future. Outside, with customers, there is a tremendous amount of skepticism, and it comes back to this idea of, as you said, shareholder return, focus on shareholder returns, and am I meeting this quarter's budgets, am I looking at that? What we know, that we've known for a long time, is that if you look beyond short-term growth, if you look at long-term growth, that's where the organization should be focusing on. And long-term growth is not driven by shareholders alone. It's driven by stakeholders. It's driven by relationships with customers. It's driven by relationships with consumers. It's driven by impact on society. That's where long-term growth comes from. But the trouble is there's been this story so long about the purpose of a business is to maximize short-term shareholder returns. That traps organizations also in the past.
Yeah, no, I can really connect with what you said. During our own transformational journey, one of the most interesting moment for me has been when one of our market leaders when we asked the question, what changed before and after?
Right.
She said, well, before we were just looking at ourselves too narrowly.
Yeah.
Now we're looking at ourselves much wider. And I have a feeling then putting purpose at the center also brings an organization much closer to its potential.
Yes.
You're constantly on that edge of what can be. And when you walk that edge, what have you seen in organizations that really are able to walk the edge of the possible?
Okay. First of all, realize that financial metrics and financial success is necessary but not sufficient for success. We have to do that, but that's given. But where is really the growth going to come from? What do we put at the center of our thinking? And if we put meeting short-term budgets and finances at our thinking, it traps us in. If we think about putting the purpose at the center of our strategy, what it means is putting our impact at the center of our strategy. And our impact is both how do we impact and empower people in our organization, but also how do we anticipate and serve needs of people around that we serve, or the society that we operate in. Because this idea of putting purpose and impact at the center does open up these windows. It not only empowers customers, its stakeholders, it also empowers our people and our employees. And that's where putting purpose at the core. If purpose is just the words on a wall, then it actually leads to cynicism because we're saying, this is what we could be, but we're not serious. What we're serious about is, are you going to meet your budget? Or are you meeting your targets? Or are you meeting your metrics? And the cynicism in most organizations when it's words on a wall is appropriate. They should be cynics because if you say something and you don't take it into your actions and your decisions, if you don't take it into redefining what is your business, if you don't take it into shaping your future, it is just words on a wall.
Yeah, I mean, you say clearly in your research, if it doesn't impact decision making and value proposition, then why are you focusing on purpose effectively? Yep. Because it becomes another flavor of the month in a sense, another poster on a wall. And as I was mentioning before, have you seen companies doing something that really stuck out to you in terms of following this and making it real? Are there some characteristics on the company that you study that really make this real?
What we find is that we're talking a lot now, again, in shaping a future. And one of the things that we see is that when companies talk about this real transformation, what they're doing is they're redefining what their business is in, but thinking from outside in. So they're not thinking about my traditional industry or way of operating. They're thinking about where in the world can I operate and where can I have impact. The second thing that they're rethinking about is how do they create value? Because in most organizations today, we have a very short-term transactional focus. So how much am I selling to you? How much are you buying? But it's from me to you. When I talk about a relational focus, it really talks about, wait a minute, how do I start with you? How do I understand what your needs are? How do and not just at this moment of time, but through your life. And if you start focusing on going from transactional focus to long-term relational focus, it also changes how you create value in what you sell. Let me give a quick example. And I'll try to give a basic example. Let's talk about a tractor producer. So one way I can look at my business is I'm a producer of tractors And what I want to do is I want to add on some features, I want to lower my cost, I want to enter a few new markets, and I want to grow my market share. But that's not where you have an impact. I mean, what's the issues that are facing society today? Issues are facing society today is, how do I generate enough food to feed the world? They're focused on things like, how do I empower farmers to be successful? If you take the idea of, I'm not in the business of tractors, I'm in the business of empowering farmers and contributing to sustainable nutrition, then you start to ask a different set of questions. It's not just about the product, it's about the relationship, it's about understanding the needs, it's about operating in a completely different way. So when we talk about putting purpose actually at the core of strategy, it has to do with redefining what your business you're in. Are you in the business of tractors or sustainable nutrition? Or empowering farmers? Is your business about selling a tractor, or is it about understanding and meeting a need? It changes the mindset, and it changes how you define what business you're in and what you're doing. That's where we see over and over again this impact. Redefining the business, redefining the value proposition, redefining relationships. That's where purpose at the core has its big impact.
No, and this resonates with us in the life insurance business because yeah, we do life insurance, and our interests are incredibly aligned with the policyholder that buys a policy. We also want that policyholder to live a healthy and long life, for example. So are we in the health and wellness business, or are we in the life insurance business? So we're posed more and more with these questions.
But are you in the business of protection, or are you in the business of actually helping people live better lives? Are you in the business of helping them by understanding what their needs are and helping them anticipate needs? You have so much data and insight. How much do you use that data and insight to sell a policy versus helping an individual live a better life? You know, being their partner, understanding what the opportunities, understanding what the challenges are. I mean, you touch people's lives. What you do in insurance is important, and it's not about selling a policy.
I know it is so true. I mean, we have a wonderful example with this, where if you try to get a life policy, you get medically underwritten.
Right.
We have very skilled doctors that would review your health data, but that health data is only used to then have a risk assessment and set the price for your policy. We never come back to you and say, hey, you got the policy, and on top of that, you got this health assessment.
Yep.
And that could be the first step into a long-lasting engagement on improving that person's health over the life of a policy.
And how can you help that person anticipate? Right now in your industry, too often you use risk as a negative. You use risk as a way of saying, I'm going to accept a policy or not, or hey, this is what the price is going to be. What if you could actually take your expertise in risk and help people live on a day-to-day basis a more healthy life, a more active life, empower them to take more chances, because you can help them understand and manage risks. You know, so as opposed to risk being a negative, how could you turn your perspective on risk to enable people to live? Then that's life insurance.
Yeah, and I think in the post-COVID world, or in the new post-pandemic world, that will be one of the challenges of the industry, right? Now people are much more health aware. They've done much more on digital as well, so we can get to them in different ways. So that is a challenge that we're facing, supporting our clients, facing these challenges, and our clients are facing the challenge. But there definitely, the request is there now, even from consumers, of, yeah, I buy a life policy. Can this be really just the 2 touch points? You know, I pay the premium, and then when I die, somebody will pay a claim, or when something happens to me, somebody will pay a claim. Can we transform that into a relationship instead of a transaction?
Exactly.
Right? Can life insurance become an experience instead of just a product? That is our challenge. And on this line, how you know, I know this is not exactly your area, but what have you noticed in the leaders that are embracing a purpose transformation? What kind of mindset do those leaders have in your experience?
One of the companies we have a pleasure of working with is Mars Pet Care. And Paul Wyrick, who's the head of that unit. They have a purpose not only for the business, which is reshaping their business and portfolio, doing amazing things, doubling the size of the business, tripling the growth rate, doing all of that. But they have a purpose for their leadership team. And the purpose for their leadership team is being the courageous architects of the future. Now, if you look at most leadership teams, what do they see their role as? I sit in my room and I'm the expert. Come to me for decisions. Come to me when, and I'm going to manage my part of the business. Just think about changing the mindset from managing a business to being a courageous architect of the future. That's where leaders can have the bigger impact. Leadership legacy is not, did you meet your budgets? Leadership legacy is, what kind of an organization do you create and leave behind for the people who follow you? That's where the leadership impact is. And how do we turn our mindset of our leaders away from saying, okay, now I have the power, I have to use all my expertise from the past to make decisions, to saying, no, how do I enable and empower my organization? That's where my power is as a leader. And that's where your responsibility is as a leader. And that's where you can have impact as a leader, not by being a micromanager or a decision maker. It's by empowering people on a direction to go together to create something different. That's where leadership is exciting.
And I think what you just said about empowering and getting people to move together, I think many of us have felt this during the pandemic.
Right.
In a sense, the pandemic has been an eye-opening on how much people can do on their own effectively. Right. How much, when people given the right amount of empowerment, can actually realize. When I talk to other leaders, I think we've all experienced the same.
Yeah.
Now, one of the key questions that is in many leaders' minds is, as we move now to this new phase of the pandemic world, or start exiting the pandemic world, how can we take some of the good here that we've seen during the pandemic and bring it with us forward? Yep. Any thoughts you have on that side?
There's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, let's just step back and look at where we are in terms of kind of historical flow. Because there has been so much talk about, in greenwashing, there's been cynicism about trends and things like that. We're actually now moving to a period of time where we're reaching a tipping point in many of these trends. So we have to move as organizations away from kind of like an era of talk to almost like a decade of action, so that we can actually start to address some of these issues. So the responsibility on organizations is really increasing. But we've also found is that that's not just something that's seen by, someone outsider looking at the company. It's also what is felt by people in the organization. Having worked with many, many companies, one of the biggest problems we find is when either us as an academic or a consultant comes in and gives an answer. Because strategy is not answers. It's about asking questions and making choices and decisions. I've never found, in all the companies we've worked with, I've never found an organization that when you tap into it, the people don't have a passion for contributing to something for the future. I've never seen, all the best ideas in the companies we've worked with have come from in the organization. But the question is we as leaders don't know how to tap into and empower and listen to that energy. We talk about things like think outside of the box, but then we shove them back in a box every time we measure their budget. We talk about things like create innovation, but then we limit it to the incremental around what we already do. In organizations, there is such a passion that people have to contribute to creating something. And one of our issues as leaders, and as kind of advisors, is not to come up with the right idea, not to come up with an answer, but it's to empower an organization and the people in the organization to explore, to think, to create, to bring out their passion to really shape this future. That's where the energy exists in our organizations if we can just figure out how to tap into it.
Yeah, no, we have had this, I can fully connect with this. We start to call this emergence. Yeah. How do we bring people together and let that energy emerge and let that sense of direction emerge in the group? Now, not very easy as a leader, because then what is your role as a leader there, right? Yeah. So I don't know if you've seen this leader questioning their roles as they go through this process.
But you being a CEO is actually a very lonely position, because you're expected to come up with answers to things that there's no answers for. You're dealing with uncertainty. And how do you actually give a leader and a leadership team the ability to think, to explore, to create, to engage with, and to become a member of a team as opposed to an individual. You are much more powerful as an organization than you are as an individual. And I've never met any individual who has all the answers. But I can tell you about leaders who are good at listening, who are good at encouraging, who are good at exploring, and then bringing it together to really move an organization forward. So what it means to be an effective leader is not a leader as a manager, a leader as a decision maker, a leader as a controller. It's really it's a leader as an empowerer, as leading a journey, is focusing on what I can create, not what I manage.
Yeah, no, I have to say that feeling of loneliness was much, much more there before we started the purpose transformation. Now, yeah, I find it magical. One of the things that happened to us as we transformed more into a purpose-driven organization is how much the dialogue, the conversation has been brought down to meaning.
Yes.
Instead of the nitty-gritty of the how and the what. That also is part of the conversation, but always starting from the meaning. And that has driven a very different decision making, a very different collaborations in the teams. And I'm sure you observed that in many places.
In the organization, when you start tapping into the passion of your employees, when you start listening to them and actually challenging and engaging with them, what they can come up with is amazing. What they can come up with. And when you partner with them and say, look, I'm in this journey with you. This is the direction we want to go. And that's what purpose does, is it creates an alignment on a direction. It creates an alignment on where we're trying to take the company. So purpose is not a plan. Purpose is a journey. But when you actually engage with people to say, this is the journey we're on, and I'm not hiring you just for your execution today. I'm hiring you to help me to create this future that we're going for. That's much more powerful. Too often we deal with executives inside of a company, and I've heard this over and over again. I know what I should do, but if I want to meet my metrics, this is what I have to do. If you ask them not to meet their metrics, but to create the metrics, create the option, create the direction, create this, that's where you see the passion of people coming out. And the passion of people is the best resource you have as a leader. The passion of your people, the insight, the expertise of your people is much more powerful than what you can create in your own mind.
No, I can feel this. I can feel this every day. And as we come towards the end of this conversation, any final thoughts that you want to leave our listeners with?
I mean, there's a lot of discussion today that things like purpose are the enabler of long-term profitability or long-term growth, and it is. Because when we talk about putting purpose at the core of our strategy, what we're talking about doing is unleashing it from being trapped in the past. Too many times we have great organizations, but they're so trapped in the past. And how do your responsibility of a leader is not managing today. Your responsibility as a leader is shaping the future and creating the future. And your responsibility as a leader, and what's been impressive in watching how you've taken purpose in your organization, I mean, it's not just different feeling for you, it's also a different feeling for them. And what you do as a business, insurance as an industry is important. It's not enough for you just to say, I'm going to manage risk to focus on pricing and accepting a policy or not. What you do impacts people's lives. What you do as an industry enables how people live every day. And for you to take on that's your responsibility as an insurance company. It's not just to pay a policy when somebody dies, it's to help them live. And that's what's been most impressive also in terms of watching how you've led the purpose journey at SCORE, because that's what comes out. I mean, I love your purpose statement, because life is important.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you for joining us today. I feel super energized after this conversation, and I hope the people that follow this conversation feel the same. So thank you. And to all of you, we'll see you soon with more conversations.